a song, a book, and a dish.
On 702.
702, we look forward to this all week. I always say that, but I always say it because it is true. It's where we spend time with somebody who you probably know about. You probably know a few things about them, but there's so much more to know. And we call it a song, a book, and a dish because we bring someone in and we ask them, amongst the many other questions, to pick for us a favorite dish, a book that has really inspired them, or just a book they absolutely love, and a piece of music. I suspect that's always the hardest one to choose because there is so much music that we encounter in our lives and so much music that we love. But my guest has made his choices, and I am delighted to have him with us. He's made an extraordinary contribution to South African literature. He's written fiction, he's written non-fiction, he has written in many publications, City Press, Sunday World, Sunday Times. I could go on, but we would run out of time. Fred Khumalo, welcome. It's great to have you with us on 702 Drive.
John, thank you very much for the honor. It was a surprise for me to be invited here. It's an honor, a definite honor.
Great. Well, we're very pleased to have you. Tell me this, before we go into your specific song, your book, your dish, and other aspects that we're going to chat about, when you're busy with a book and when you're busy writing, what do you listen to music while you write? Do you listen to music while you think about what you're about to write?
It varies from book to book. When I was writing, for example, Bitches Brew,
yes,
which is another Miles Davis inspired novel.
Right.
I listened to a lot to that song. It's a very long song, Bitches Brew. It's very complicated and loud. So I listened to that as I was writing. And people who read the book have observed that the cadences of the sentences are like jazz phrases. Yeah, because I was really, really loud playing it and writing. Yeah, but with other books, no, I do not want any distractions.
Yeah, interesting. So if you're playing loud music and somebody objects, you can say, "I'm sorry, but I'm writing. I'm working. I'm not indulging." What do you eat when you're writing? Is it kind of do you become distracted and immersed in the creativity and then think, "Oops, I better butter a slice of bread," or are you quite conscious about making sure that you eat well?
I eat well, I exercise well, so I'm always fit. Because writing lengthy manuscripts and novels and non-fiction books is a very strenuous and very demanding exercise. So as a person who is physically active, I feel the benefit of being fit when I'm writing because I can sit at my desk for the whole day maybe. When I was a full-time writer, I could sit there for 6 hours with a few short breaks in between.
Wow.
But I could feel the physicality of it.
Yeah.
So you have to be fit and obviously mentally focused to write.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I've never heard it put that way. Let's go back. Let's go right back in time in Mpumalanga Township where you grew up. Hammersdale area up the N2 from the N3 from Durban?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay.
People always confuse my township with the lousy province called Mpumalanga. No, we are older than the province.
but we're named, I suppose, with the same sentiment, the Rising Sun.
The Rising Sun, there's a lot of optimism behind that name.
Yeah.
If you have been in the vicinity of our township, you know the landscape is to die for. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's part of the Valley of 1,000 Hills. So it's lush, it's evergreen, it's really, really beautiful. That is, I think, what inspired the name. Whoever gave it the name was looking at the landscape itself, and they came up with this beautiful name.
So, oldest of 8 children, and obviously with an interest in books and so on. Where did you get hold of books when you were a kid? What kind of books were you able to find?
Okay, I come from a very big family. My parents were not really educated. My mother was a domestic worker. Surprisingly, she was educated for her time because she had a high school education. Well, she dropped out when she was a junior certificate, which is grade 10 these days.
Right.
So she could read and write, but job opportunities were not available. So she ended up becoming a domestic worker. So she would bring books from work, Enid Blyton and all that. Even though English is my third language, I started reading English texts at quite an early age, because at school it was a different case altogether, because we learned English being taught, we were taught English grammar in Zulu, you know, so that we were working at a disadvantage. So to answer your question, where did I really get access to books? It was only when I was in high school and interacted with the likes of Mafika Gwala, who is a very famous figure in the township. He's an author and the poet. So I joined his cultural group because I was just interested in the performance poetry that they were doing. And then I got access to books that inspired me to read more. Alan Paton, Cry the Beloved Country, and of course a lot of American books, Richard Wright, James Baldwin, those kind of guys, Toni Morrison even,
We'll talk about Toni Morrison in a moment, because that's your selection of most important book. I would imagine was a hard choice. But can you remember a particular book or a particular writer that kind of bridged you out of maybe the reading for pleasure of a younger person into the world of reading for ideas, something a bit more formative? Was there anything that you read that you thought, okay, we're going to a different level here?
I could easily say that would be James Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son. It's a collection of essays where he looks at how America is dealing with the question of race and class and so on. So prior to being exposed to his work, I had, as I said, read books for kids, for teenagers, for leisure. And one of my most memorable authors of the time when I was in high school was James Hadley Chase. Okay. I think you've heard of him.
I have, and it is amazing when we talk about the book part of Songbook Dish, the number of people. I think I seem to remember Mbazima Shaloa telling us about James Hadley Chase books. It may have been him, but it could have been a number of people saying they were absolutely prized, and friends would be saying, come, are you nearly finished? We're waiting.
Yeah. So that's what happened as well in the township. We started, one would buy a book, it would be 75 cents or something. Yeah. And we would share it. And sometimes you charge people if they are late returning it.
Library fines.
And the thing is, with those books, they were very entertaining, fast-paced. Yes. The English was easier, no long words, short sentences, very racy and entertaining and memorable. They were an echo of the movies that we were watching at that time. Yes. So they complemented each other. So that's why they were very, very popular.
So it was like Staring by James Hadley Chase.
Of course.
So let's move away from books for a minute. I'll come back to Toni Morrison, but meal times. Your mom's a domestic worker, presumably with a longish commute, so not necessarily getting home all that early. Your dad's a factory worker at the Barter's shoe factory. Did you gather as a family to eat, or were you the oldest, expected to kind of get stuff ready and tell us?
Yeah, you've made a very important point here about the long commute. Yeah. So my parents both worked in Pinetown, in the Pinetown area. Yes. Which at the time was a bit distant. The transport was not reliable. There were no combi taxis, so they used buses. Right. So they would leave home around 5 a.m. and only come back at 7 p.m. So that's why at the age of 10, my mother made it a point that she taught me how to cook. So basic stuff like uputu, the pap we have in KZN, and cabbage, and those simple daily meals that we would have on a daily basis, and porridge for my siblings. Before we went to school, we would have taken a porridge or bread with jam and tea. So that was my responsibility as the oldest kid. Sure. So I started, by the time I got to high school, I could cook quite comprehensively. I could cook comprehensive dishes. So that's why to this day I still cook. I enjoy cooking. So it doesn't become a curse or a challenge or whatever.
So I don't want to forget your book, Toni Morrison, Beloved, a really important novel that many people will know, published, I'm just checking the date, but in the 1980s, I think.
1987.
1987, and it's the story of enslaved people in the US. Was it hard to choose that? And once you chose it, why did you choose it?
It was very hard because I read voraciously. I've got more than 2,000 books at my house, and many of which I've read numerous times and enjoyed. So, Toni Morrison, I can't remember what criteria I used in choosing Toni Morrison, but it's one of those that I keep going back to. For the story itself, for the politics around the story, and the writing, the aesthetic part, where you just look and analyze and enjoy, you immerse yourself in the beauty of the language. And Toni Morrison did very well, not only with this book, but with others as well.
I'm going to jump into your food, and those people who are driving and who are far from home and a long way from dinner are not going to thank me for this. But you've told Oxtail, grilled veggies on the side, and when we're done with it, well, you brought this up, and then when we're done with all of that, blueberry cheesecake ice cream. Can you make all of these things, and do you make them well?
Well, blueberry cheese ice cream I buy.
Yes, okay.
But oxtail, yes. But as you know, it's very demanding to cook oxtail. Time consuming, and you have to get it right.
ESCOM is not your friend.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we've always used gas to cook at home, so that's not a major challenge. So I cook it, but not as often as I would like to consume it. Because it takes a long time, and my wife says no, I don't have that time. Every now and then she'll say, okay, let me do it for you. But she's a busy woman, she's a professional woman, so she can't be cooking for me every time.
Let's get into your music choice.
Yes.
You've chosen Miles Davis again. You mentioned Bitches Brew and the inspiration for what I think was your first work of fiction.
Yes.
All Blues, 1959, an absolute classic, but presumably it comes from a larger love of jazz. But why is Miles Davis very particularly close in your heart, and if so, why?
Yeah, in the entire jazz universe, there are two players that speak to me. Miles Davis and his friend and contemporary John Coltrane. They always, even on this song, they play together. Miles is the band leader, Toni is on tenor. So they speak to me. This song is very profound without being glib and boring and ponderous. Yeah, it's danceable. You can hum along it, and then you get to this when you get to the solos now. The cannonball Adderley coming in there, Coltrane screaming and growling, and of course there's Bill Evans on piano, keeping time there. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, the music has already inspired many books, 17 of them so far, and much besides, books in English, books in isiZulu. And we thank you very much, Fred Khumalo, for joining us on 702 Drive and sharing with us your song, your book, and your dish. Enjoy now the wondrous artistry of Miles Davis.
Thank you.